Hello, my name is Melissa Treinkman, and today I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about lifting the curse of knowledge in voice pedagogy. In summing up the phenomenon known as the curse of knowledge, Steven Pinker writes, "The better you know something, the less you remember how hard it was to learn." Thinking of knowledge as a curse is counterintuitive to most people, many of whom have been indoctrinated with the adage, knowledge is power. The curse of knowledge, a term originally coined by economists, is a type of cognitive bias in which people do not realize that their expertise is not shared by others. After something is learned, it's difficult to imagine what it's like not to know it, and therefore the apparent gift of knowledge effectively curses those endowed with it. Inevitably, communication and understanding suffer because it is assumed by the expert, who is unaware of the bias, that the knowledge is obvious. In reference to teaching and learning, Chip and Dan Heath jokingly described it this way: when you open your mouth and communicate, without thinking about what's coming out of your mouth, you're speaking your native language, expertise. But students do not speak expertise. Teachers take their fluency in their native language or area of expertise for granted, and often can be under the impression that their message has been relayed when, alas, their students are utterly lost. Experts also tend to assume the information they have internalized is simpler and clearer than it actually is, due to the fact that this information comes to their minds so easily and rapidly. The curse of knowledge has important implications for voice teachers and is especially relevant in the era of voice science, in which effective communication can be a challenge. Voice pedagogues can increase the effectiveness of their teaching by first becoming aware of the pervasiveness of the curse of knowledge and taking concrete steps, some of which will be detailed in this presentation, to render it less powerful. By now, some of you may be wondering whether or not the curse of knowledge affects your teaching. The bad news is that one of the defining features of the curse of knowledge is that its victims are usually unsuspecting. An experiment devised by Elizabeth Newton, a PhD student in psychology at Stanford University, captures the staggering power of the curse. In her study, Newton separated the participants into two groups: the tappers and the listeners. The tappers were asked to choose a well-known song and tap the rhythm out to the listeners. The tappers predicted the odds that the listeners would be able to discern the name of the song were 50%, or 1 in 2 songs would be guessed correctly. Let's try it. I'll be the tapper. You see if you can figure out the song. Did you guess that the song was Happy Birthday? In Newton's study, the listeners were able to guess the song only 2.5% of the time, or 1 in 40 songs. To the tappers, who are hearing the song in their heads as they tap, it is mind-boggling that the listeners cannot guess the song, which to the tappers is obvious. Voice teachers are susceptible to the trap the tappers fell into. When a voice teacher speaks of laryngeal elevation to a novice student, or an elite voice pedagogue references the spectral envelope, a song is playing in their heads that most people, despite their best intentions, are not able to hear. If the curse of knowledge is a problem that most people are not conscious of, shouldn't the age-old maxim of awareness is the first step provide the solution? If a light is shown on the curse of knowledge and teachers become aware that they most likely suffer from it, perhaps its effects can be adequately combated. Unfortunately, science tells us that the curse is not so easily lifted. Awareness is a good point of departure, but studies have shown that even when people were explicitly warned about its existence and advised to try to recall what it was like for them to learn something new, the curse of knowledge remains strong. There are a number of reasons why the curse is so stubborn, An appreciation of these elements will aid in an understanding of the magnitude of the problem and also clarify why teachers may need to go farther than they expect to fight it. Imaging studies have shown that the brains of novices and experts are activated differently when dealing with a problem, and that the brain changes and activates differently when mastery is attained. In the motor learning realm, there's also evidence of neural efficiency in the brains of experts when compared to novices. Essentially, the brains of experts work less strenuously on the same tasks, thereby making them more efficient. Thus, it seems that there's a biological component to the curse of knowledge. Expertise changes the brain. Carl Wieman cautions that in pedagogy, there is an assumption that all brains are the same. And so passing along what is clear to us will be clear to the novice student. And if it fails, it's an indication that the students are simply incapable. Instead, it's important to understand that attaining mastery is not about transferring knowledge from teacher to student. Rather, expertise requires restructuring of the brain over time. Because the brain of the expert and the brain of the novice activate so differently, especially when engaging in problem-solving activities, it seems natural that the expert brain takes shortcuts that the novice brain is not wired to take. Pinker explains that the expert brain is capable of shortcuts due to its mastery of chunks of abstract information. For example, a voice teacher who utters or writes the phrase, "Male singers need to learn to let the second harmonic rise above the first formant in negotiating the passaggio," has unknowingly chunked a large amount of information into that compact phrase. Students and most other voice professionals have not spent countless hours looking at spectrograms and forming chunks of information that synthesize complex concepts such as harmonics and formants, much less how they interact. As a result, this teacher will probably receive a glazed over look from those on the receiving end of this statement. Because the problem with chunks, according to Pinker, is that as we read and learn, we master a vast number of these abstractions, and each becomes a mental unit which we can bring to mind in an instant and share with others by uttering its name. An adult mind that is brimming with chunks is a powerful engine of reason, but it comes with a cost. A failure to communicate with minds that have not mastered the same chunks. It's understandable that experts prefer to speak using chunks because it's vastly more efficient, satisfying, and precise for someone proficient in them. Part of what defines expertise is the ability to deal with abstract mental concepts. And for experts, chunking is much more stimulating than communicating concretely. Another mental shortcut that allows the curse of knowledge to thrive is called the availability heuristic, which is the tendency to recall more recent experiences and memories more accurately than older ones. This is why a voice teacher might have a vivid memory of a student's voice lesson 1 hour after the lesson, but cannot recall the details a week later. The availability heuristic also explains why experts often cannot remember the source of their fluency in a given topic, or the experiences they had while learning. The passage of time is an important contributing factor to the curse of knowledge, because the farther away one gets from the learning phase, the foggier it becomes in the mind. For instance, for many teachers, the conceptual framework and motor skills required to achieve optimal breath support were mastered so long ago that the process of how it was learned is no longer accessible in their minds. As a result, experts may be less capable of relating to the experience of novice learners. Pamela Hines, professor in management science and engineering at Stanford University, found that experts underestimated performance times of novices. Experts unconsciously viewed a task as simpler than it was, partially because they did not have an accurate memory of their own novice experience, even when they felt like they did. Voice teachers, for instance, might expect students to achieve laryngeal stabilization more quickly and easily than is realistic, because they most likely cannot accurately remember their own experience of learning as a novice. As expert teachers demonstrate, they may be unaware of the fact that they have automated certain other aspects of their technique, such as tongue position, soft palate, breath pressure, that all aid in laryngeal stabilization. However, because these other elements were mastered so long ago and require no conscious control on their part, they may no longer perceive how crucial they are to achieving the desired outcome. It should now be clear that the curse of knowledge is a force to be reckoned with. The question is, what are teachers to do? The next half of this presentation will offer some suggestions for lifting the curse. In her study, besides finding that experts were poor predictors of novice performance, Hines also discovered that those with intermediate levels of expertise were significantly better at it. Hines suggested that since intermediates are closer to the experience of learning the material themselves, they possess a better idea of how long it would take novices to perform certain tasks. Imagine a graduate student who is better able to translate the teacher's approach to legato singing to an undergraduate student because the graduate student only recently mastered that skill and has a fresher memory of the learning process. Weeman goes further and suggests that in his own experience, a physics teacher's memory of learning physics years ago is not a trustworthy gauge of the best ways to teach. He was surprised when beginning graduate students reported very different ideas about what made an excellent learning experience compared to faculty members' views on the same topic. Weeman warns that knowing a subject is profoundly different from knowing how that subject is best learned. It's clear that experts are crucial figures in any field and are essential to progress and the advancement of knowledge. Still, intermediates can also play an important and underappreciated role, especially in the world of pedagogy, due to their more accurate memory of novice experiences. Therefore, collaboration with intermediates is one of the most effective ways to circumvent the curse of knowledge. Universities could make an effort to infuse curricular planning with intermediates, who can offer insight into the best approaches to teaching certain subjects and also help identify which courses students actually find useful. Perhaps a survey of graduate students might aid more seasoned teachers in understand what constitutes, in their opinion, effective and ineffective learning experiences. Academic committees should make an effort to include a variety of teachers at various points in their careers to make sure to get a balanced perspective. Peer learning opportunities, such as may be afforded in studio class, may also play a critical role here and have been shown to be valuable in the overall learning process. The bottom line is that collaboration with intermediates can help mitigate the effects of the curse of knowledge and provide elite experts the opportunity to stay in touch with the student experience. In his New York Times best-selling book, If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? Alan Alda reveals, naming something doesn't make it understandable. For singers, the ubiquitous phrase, use your diaphragm, is a case in point. Even if the singer knows exactly what the diaphragm is and where it's located, they are still probably at a loss as to how to use it. In attempting to escape the curse of knowledge, teachers should avoid using jargon, which includes abbreviations, technical vocabulary, chunking, and abstractions. This can be difficult for experts who have spent many years attaining fluency in abstract concepts and esoteric language specific to their chosen expertise. It is often expedient for experts to use jargon when a single word can encapsulate 3 pages of dense information, for instance. Alda adds that jargon can have the pleasure of speaking a secret language, and people seem to bond when they share a shorthand, We're the ones that talk like this. Jargon is satisfying and harmless when both parties are conversant in it. The problem surfaces when experts, thanks to the curse of knowledge, misjudge their audience. Even those who are positive that their audience understands them might be very surprised to learn that they do not. There is evidence to suggest that most people are overconfident in determining what other people are thinking. Pinker laments that he, despite being one of the preeminent psychologists of the day, is often baffled by articles in his own field. There well may be a fair number of voice pedagogues reading the Journal of Singing or the Journal of Voice in this same position. Jargon can also prove to be a barrier to coordination between teams of experts. In the voice world, there's a disconnect between teachers who embrace voice science and those who prefer the older, more empirical model of voice pedagogy. In attempting to find a common ground among different cohorts of people, the Heath brothers suggest finding a universal language and insist this is quite different than dumbing down the information. Concrete language can help people with different knowledge bases communicate and collaborate to the betterment of the field as a whole. Those who are unfamiliar yet curious about voice science may be deterred by jargon and abstract language because they don't have a point of entry. For example, if a presentation at a voice conference is overly complex and filled with jargon, the non-expert may not even have a way to take the first step and form a question. In many cases, the missing link in communication of any kind, including teaching, is empathy. Empathy is a crucial skill that helps teachers better judge whether or not their message is being understood. As they communicate, empathetic teachers look for clues in their students' faces and body language to help them surmise what is going on in their heads. Has the student gotten lost somewhere along the way? Duke cautions that just because you are busy doing things that seem to you like teaching, this is no reason to believe that the students in the room with you are necessarily learning what you intend for them to learn. It is the responsibility of teachers to track whether or not their teaching is getting through to their students. And empathy training can help build this ability to, as we might say, read students' minds. Some teachers might be unaware that they could benefit from an increased level of empathy. Alan Alda recommends an online test developed by University of Cambridge professor Simon Baron-Cohen called Reading the Mind in the Eyes, which measures empathy by how well someone can read other people's emotional states from their eyes alone. Whether or not a test like this can accurately detect empathy, Lynn Helding writes that it's probable that most of us suffer from empathy deficits, and that as teachers, much of our success hinges on our ability to empathize with students. And the degree to which our students believe we care about them is directly proportional to how well they will follow our recommendations. Empathy training and learning to be more attentive to another person's emotional state can help teachers intuit whether or not their teaching is effective. Reading other people and possessing the ability to track whether or not one's communication is being understood is a vital component of being an excellent teacher and can help mitigate the curse of knowledge. The good news is that empathy is a skill that can be learned, and Alda argues that all people can take steps to become better at reading and relating to others. One of Alda's missions in life is to help scientists better communicate their ideas in lucid, striking, and memorable ways. As an actor, Alda espouses the virtues of improvisation training throughout his book and has explored what he thinks is a direct communication between improvisation and empathy. His description of improvisation could easily be a recipe for learning to be more empathetic. An improviser, much like a mind reader, must observe the other person, track body language and tone of voice, intuit their thoughts and feelings. One does not necessarily need to enroll in an improvisation class to improve the skill of mind reading and therefore empathy. Alda recommends starting in everyday life by becoming more attentive to the emotions of others. Human beings are often so caught up in their own thoughts, concerns, and daily tasks that they do not pay attention to others, much less take note of their emotions. Halding writes that attention is directly linked to empathy, and by improving our attentional abilities, increased empathy will follow suit. Alda began a practice of silently naming emotions of other people that he encountered in the world. He found that when he was highly and sharply attentive to intuiting what others were feeling and not what they were thinking, his attitudes about them changed. He was more tolerant, patient, and also found that when he did this exercise, the other person changed as well. Their countenance and tone of voice softened, and there was a greater amount of connection. In the whirlwind that is a busy day of teaching, teachers might practice looking students in the eye and silently naming their emotions as a way to set the stage for the lesson. Alda actually inspired Matt Lerner, a social psychologist at Stony Brook, to perform a research study on whether naming emotions and paying close attention to social interactions could improve empathy scores. He found that naming and paying attention to the emotions of others does actually improve one's ability to read the emotions of others after a single week, if it is practiced every day. What seems certain is that empathy wanes over time and needs to be constantly renewed, cultivated, and practiced. Alda also advocates responsive listening as a key to empathy and writes, "Unless I'm willing to be changed by you, I'm probably not really listening." For teachers, being changed means reacting to the student in the moment and potentially completely changing the course of the lesson. Establishing a rapport and trust are also vital components of this puzzle. If the student feels comfortable with the teacher and is willing to risk looking foolish, they will have the wherewithal to stop the teacher and ask for clarification on a concept that the teacher erroneously thinks the student understands. Thanks again, of course, to the curse of knowledge. Jackie Wiggins contends that students are experts at assessing their own knowledge, and if they're unsure, they know it. Likewise, teachers also need to be reminded to pause to make sure their communication is gotten and know when to stop talking. Alda recommends you not only have to start with what they already understand, you have to know when to stop or they'll feel swamped. As teachers, learning something completely new and foreign is another strategy for becoming more empathetic to the experience of others. Although Alan Alda would certainly recommend an improvisation class, any activity in which the teacher can assume the role of pure novice will do the trick. The varied emotions of fear, excitement, dread, and confusion that one might experience during an initial improv class or a lesson in Mandarin, let's say, could inform teachers firsthand as to how students feel at their very first lesson. For a teacher whose first voice lesson was 30 or more years ago, periodically assuming the role of the novice could be an enlightening exercise. In the book Made to Stick, Dan and Chip Heath glorify prioritization as one of the fiercest weapons against the curse of knowledge. The central question for teachers is, what is absolutely necessary for the student to know in order to be successful? After hearing a new voice student, the teacher might have 5 separate technical issues to address and may struggle to suppress the instinct to relay all that information to the student at once. The Heath brothers admit that forced prioritization is really painful. Smart people recognize the value of all the material. This tendency to gravitate toward complexity is perpetually at war with the need to prioritize. Teachers have much more information to impart than students could possibly learn. And part of the art of teaching lies in assessing how much information the student can handle, how much time the teacher has to achieve a specific goal, and what information may be omitted in the meantime. Some experts argue that if information is omitted or simplified too much, accuracy will be sacrificed. However, as Dan and Chip Heath argue, accuracy to the point of uselessness is a symptom of the curse of knowledge. And experts must inhibit their desire to give all the information they possess at once. Students need teachers to present information gradually and in small doses, which prevents them from feeling overwhelmed. For example, in explaining what causes the vocal folds to produce sound, perhaps an initial discussion of the Bernoulli effect is sufficient, even though, of course, it's not completely accurate without a discussion of the myoelastic aerodynamic theory of phonation and inertive reactance. Alan Alda devised the rule of three, the 3 rules of 3, as his way to prioritize during speaking engagements. And these rules may prove useful and memorable to voice teachers as well. Number 1, present no more than 3 pieces of information at once. Number 2, explain complex concepts in 3 different ways. And 3, make an important point 3 times. This relentless prioritization also inspired Alda's Flame Challenge. The Flame Challenge is a yearly contest in which scientists from around the globe are asked to explain a complex scientific phenomenon, such as, what is a flame? In such a clear and engaging way that an 11-year-old would understand it. True to Alda's style, actual 11-year-olds are the judges of this contest. Perhaps NATS should sponsor a Formant Challenge in an effort to shed light on this confounding topic for many confused voice teachers and singers. Alda is a passionate believer that simplicity and prioritization do not translate to dumbing down complicated ideas. Rather, it takes an enormous amount of skill and elegance to boil down complexity so far without losing substance that the majority of people can achieve comprehension. Another one of the most effective ways to escape the curse of knowledge is to anchor in what a person already knows. The first automobiles were called horseless carriages because the concept of a car was so foreign that it needed to be anchored in something that people understood. In voice pedagogy, the use of primal sounds, such as crying or calling, can be very useful in achieving more freedom in vocal production. These sounds work because students innately understand how to produce them and have been using them since birth. Likewise, laughing or gentle coughing are tried and true methods of encouraging singers to become more aware of the body's natural support mechanism. When students can feel how the body automatically functions in activities requiring abdominal engagement, they can more easily transfer that automatic response to singing. The anchor of something familiar helps support the development of an unfamiliar skill or idea. Using analogies is another excellent way to anchor in a student's current knowledge by taking a complex idea and substituting something simpler in its place. Good voice teachers and pedagogues use analogies all the time. Imagining you are about to sneeze is a way to encourage a lifted soft palate, for example. Analogies can go a long way toward beating the curse of knowledge by anchoring in concepts that are familiar to the student. Wiggins argues that people learn better when they construct their own understanding. When students can relate new information to their own set of experiences, it allows for the construction of their own learning. The curse of knowledge is a formidable foe when it comes to teaching and learning. With each year that passes, the expert's pool of knowledge is sharpened, refined, and reflects a deeper understanding of the material. As the expert becomes more fluent, the memory of the learning experience and what it felt like not to understand fades more and more. Dan and Chip Heath observe that getting a message across has 2 stages, the answer stage and the telling others stage. They go on to say that unfortunately, the same factor that worked to your advantage in the answer stage will backfire on you during the telling others stage. To get to the answer, you need expertise, but you can't disassociate expertise from the curse of knowledge. The Heath brothers argue that in our society, the amount of time spent finding the answer is disproportionate to the time we spend figuring out how to tell others. Part of the telling others stage is realizing that our own familiarity with the subject matter is a giant blind spot. With adequate awareness and skill building and collaboration, using concrete language, empathy, prioritization, and anchoring, voice teachers will be well on their way to reversing the curse. For more information and complete references, please see the Journal of Singing article that addresses this topic. Thank you very much.